Hi everyone, my name is Nithin and welcome back to PSLE Science, and today I'll be going through plant cycle. Okay, for the first segment of this video, I'm going to go through summary of the plant cycle. Okay, for the summary of the plant cycle, first I'm going to go through 4 methods of seed dispersal, and I'll go through this in another video in a more deeper explanation. So first, there's 4 methods. One is by water, and these things over here are the properties. So the fruit should have a property of a fibrous husk. And next, by animal, the fruit should have a property of indigestible seeds or hooks. Okay. Next is by explosive action. So the fruit should have a pod-like structure. Okay. And next is by wind, and the seed should actually have a wing-like structure or a feather-like structure. So the seed should actually have a fibrous husk for water, indigestible seeds or hooks for animal, and pod-like structure for explosive action, and wing-like or feather-like structures for wind. Okay. Next, the two processes for reproduction. So first process is called pollination. So pollination is basically the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same species. Next process is fertilization. So fertilization is the process where the nucleus of the male reproductive cell in the pollen grains fuses, is a very important word, fuses with the nucleus of the female reproductive cell in the ovule. Okay, so let me show you where is the stigma and anther and ovule. Okay, so this is the stigma over here. Okay, and these yellow color things over here are actually the anther. Okay, and this over here, this part over here is actually the ovule. Sorry. So let me write that. Okay, so I hope you understand it. Now let's move on to types of pollination and agents of pollination. So types of pollination, there's such thing called self-pollination. So basically where the anther is above the stigma. So this is the anther and this the stigma. Okay, so when the anther is above the stigma, so the anther actually has pollen grains on it, very small pollen grains. So these pollen grains will actually fall into the stigma like this. So it is self-pollination. Over here, next one, cross-pollination. Enter below the stigma. So the pollen grains over here cannot go into the stigma from like that, but it has to go into another flower's stigma. That is why it's called cross-pollination. Okay, and usually cross-pollination happens with animals, insects, birds, or on, like, you know, when wind comes, and that is cross-pollination as well. So agents of pollination over here, so this happens to cross-pollination. Okay, so the wind pollinated flower actually, right, so these are the anther, right? So the wind pollinated flower actually has like this feathery stigma which will capture the pollen grains when the wind comes, because when the wind comes, right, the pollen grains of the anther, right, it will actually come off and fly. It will start flying. Okay, so it will glide through the air, and then when it comes to another flower, this feathery stigma over here will actually capture those pollen grains, and you will actually pollinate the flower. Okay, and there's also an insect or bird pollinated flower. So basically where the insect or bird will come to take nectar, like, so the a hummingbird or a bee, right, when they come to take nectar from the flower, their body will actually rub against the the pollen grains of the anther. And then when they go to the next flower, these pollen grains will actually stick onto the body of the insects, or the birds will actually like brush against the stigma or rub against the stigma, and they'll actually stick onto it. So this is how it pollinates also. So these are the two types of cross-pollination. Okay, so now let's move on. So over here we have the cycle of the plant. So this is the plant cycle. Okay, so first it starts at the seed. So the seed needs to germinate in order to become a seedling over here. Okay, so before that, the seed actually contains seed leaves. Okay, so what are these seed leaves important for? So the seed leaves actually provide food for the seedling, because the seedling doesn't actually have leaves to have their own food, you know, doesn't have the leaves to make their own food in order to survive. So these seed leaves actually provide food for the seedling, which is used for respiration to release energy for growth until its true leaves are formed. Okay, and then I hope you understand that. And then this process over here, germination, quite important. So over here is a G, this process over here. Okay, let me just write that down again. So over here is a G. Okay, so germination, you need warmth, oxygen, and water in order for the plant to germinate. And this can be remembered by the acronym of WOW. Okay, you need to take note. Okay, need to take note that oxygen is also used for respiration to release energy, and the seed does not require sunlight for germination. This is very important. The seed does not require sunlight for germination, because most students think the seed needs sunlight for germination, but actually, why is that so that it does not need sunlight? Because the seed itself is actually underground, so you do not need sunlight for seed that is underground to grow, because the seed will not receive any sunlight anyways. Okay, and next, the sunlight is only needed by the true leaves to carry out photosynthesis. So true leaves happen when the young plant is back. Okay, so this is the true leaves. Okay, next process is the roots. So the roots start growing when it's the seedling. Okay, so basically over here, this is the shoot which starts growing. So shoot, and then these are the roots. Okay, which starts growing. So the seedling already starts growing roots. And what is the function of these roots? So the roots actually grow downwards, they do not grow upwards. Okay, and the function is to actually anchor the plant firmly to the ground, and also to absorb the water and mineral salts from the soil. Okay, and you need to take note that the roots develop before the shoots develop. So before this shoot develops, the root actually starts growing first. Okay, next we need to take note about photosynthesis. And photosynthesis actually occurs when the young plant has formed its true leaves. Okay, so for photosynthesis, the true leaves have developed. So this is for the young plant. They contain chloroplasts. Okay, I hope you remember from the cell systems video, they contain chloroplasts, which contain a green pigment called chlorophyll to trap sunlight for photosynthesis to make food for the plant. And so the seed leaves are no longer required, and so they will wither and fall off. Okay, so this over here, you can see that these two are the seed leaves. Okay, and these seed leaves will soon wither and fall off. Okay. Next, this is the adult plant. Okay, so the adult plant starts forming flowers, fruits, and it becomes bigger as well, and it has reached its final stage. So when it starts developing fruits, right? So then when it starts developing flowers and fruits, we can say it's a adult plant. Okay. Okay. So next, from the adult plant, the flower starts to form. Okay, the flower starts to form. So from this flower over here, there's a stigma, anther, ovule. So first, pollination needs to occur. First, pollination needs to occur. Then second, fertilization needs to occur. Then after fertilization, the ovule of the flower becomes the fruit. So this fruit is a tomato fruit. Okay. Okay, some people say tomato is a vegetable, but that is totally false. Okay, so whatever has a seed is actually a fruit. Like lady's finger is a fruit as well. Okay, so all the vegetables that you think are vegetables are not vegetables, because all of them which have seeds are actually fruits. Okay, so you have to remember this in mind, because sometimes in exam, right, they ask trick questions. Just like in my prelim exam, they asked about lady's finger, and I actually thought it was a vegetable, but then only I realized it was wrong. It's actually a fruit. Okay, so then after the fruit actually starts seed dispersal again, and then after seed dispersal, the seed gets planted, and the cycle actually continues. Okay, so the cycle is a never-ending cycle. Okay, so I hope you understand the summary of the plant cycle. Now let's move on. Okay, for the second segment of this video, I am going to go through the comparisons between the wind pollinated and insect pollinated flowers. Okay, for the wind pollinated flowers and the insect pollinated flowers, insect or bird pollinated flowers, we have nectar. So in the wind pollinated flowers, there's no nectar because it is pollinated by wind. So there's you don't need to attract any birds or insects to come and have the birds or insects to rub against your the anther to transfer to the another stigma of a flower. But the insect or bird pollinated flower actually has nectar, because it wants to attract the insects and the birds to take in the nectar, because this nectar is like a luring mechanism. So the birds and insects actually don't know that they are going to pollinate flowers, right? So it actually lures them into the nectar, and their bodies actually rub against the pollen grains of the anther, and then when they fly off to another flower to take nectar, it actually gets pollinated to the other flower. Okay, next, the stigma. So for the wind pollinated flower, there's actually a sticky and feathery stigma that protrudes out of the flower, allowing the pollen grains in the air to be easily trapped more okay, so it allows to be easily trapped more easily. Okay, because when the pollen grains actually come through the wind, the stigma must be able to catch the pollen grains, right? If it's not sticky enough or feathery enough, it cannot catch the pollen grains. So each type of flower has a different type of mechanism to take in the pollen grains. Okay, so that is why this flower actually needs no attracting of insects. It just needs wind. Okay, it just needs wind. So when the wind flies past this flower, it goes to the next flower of the same type, and then it fertilizes, and then it pollinates the other flower because the stigma catches the pollen grains. Okay, next, for the insect or bird pollinated flower, the stigma is actually enclosed within the flower, okay, allowing the pollen grains of the insect's body to be brushed onto the stigma more easily. So when the insects are trying to get the nectar, right, their body will actually like brush against the stigma of the flower, and the stigma is actually sticky, right? That's why it's actually called stigma stick. So it's sticky. So the word sticky is inside stigma. So you have to remember that. So the insect actually brushes against the stigma, and the stigma will actually and the pollen grains will stick onto the stigma, okay? And so it's pollinated as well. Next, the type of anther these two flowers have are different. So for the wind pollinated flower, the anthers are hanging outside of the flower to allow the pollen grains to be carried away by the wind easily. Okay, so this is self-explanatory. So I hope you understand that. And next, for the insect or bird pollinated flowers, the anthers are enclosed within the flower to allow the insect's body to rub against the anthers easily. Like I explained. So it needs to be easier for the insects to rub against the anther so that it can, when it flies off to another flower, it can pollinate it. Okay. Next, the petals. So for wind pollinated flower, the petals don't make a big difference. The petals are actually very small and they are colored as well. But the petals of an insect and bird pollinated flower, they are actually very large and brightly colored to attract the insects or birds. So you can see wind pollinated flower just needs wind to survive, okay? It just needs wind to pollinate and fertilize flowers. But for insect or bird pollinated flowers, this flower actually needs to attract the birds and insects to come to it in order to rub against the anthers to pollinate to another stigma, okay? Next, last of all, is scent. Again, it's about attracting the birds and insects. So for wind pollinated flower, it doesn't have a scent because it is non-scented, because it doesn't need to attract anything. It just needs wind. While for insect or bird pollinated flower, it's scented to attract the insects and birds as well. Okay, so I think you understand this already. Now let's move on. Okay, for the third part of this video, I'm going to go through the investigation of the leaf. Okay, so the investigation of the leaf. So we are going to investigate the stomata. Okay, so this location is basically the stomata are found. So there's more stomata found on the underside of the leaves to avoid direct contact with the sunlight. Okay, this helps to reduce the water loss as water vapor through the stomata in the process of transpiration. Okay, you all know that when there's heat, right? When there's heat, we all sweat and we lose water, right? Okay, and this works the same way for the plants, except they don't sweat, they give out water through transpiration through their stomata. So when it's on the underside of the leaf, they actually don't have direct contact with the sunlight, okay? So that is why it reduces water loss as water vapor, okay? And this is why they are on the underside of the leaf. And also the stomata will actually burn when they are in direct sunlight. That's why there's lesser stomata on the front side of the leaf, like on the top of the leaf, and not on the underside. Okay, next, the function is basically to allow the plant to carry out gaseous exchange. So it's basically like our nose, it allows a gaseous exchange, and our lungs allow gaseous exchange. Okay, so now let's move on. For the fourth segment of this video, I am going to go through 3 types of gases exchanged at the stomata. Okay, so the 3 gases exchanged at the stomata is basically oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. Okay, next, the 3 processes that involve these gases are actually first is photosynthesis. So photosynthesis actually happens in the day, right? So photosynthesis is the process where the plants use water and carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight. So it doesn't have to be sunlight, okay? It can just be normal light as well to make food for the plant, okay? Next is respiration. So respiration is the process where plant cells use oxygen and food to release energy for life processes. So respiration happens in the day and the night, okay? And for photosynthesis, it only happens in the day. And transpiration is the process where water is lost through the stomata on the leaves as water vapor. So this also happens in the day and the night. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, for the sixth segment of this video, I'm going to go through a question. Why do the stomata increase in size during the day? Okay, so what is this question? What is the answer? So, for the advantage, I'm going to talk about in the day, the plant is able to trap sunlight for the photosynthesis to make food. Okay, so the plant is able to trap sunlight for photosynthesis to make food. Thus, the stomata increases in size during the day to allow the plant to take in more carbon dioxide. Because you know, for photosynthesis to happen, when there's more carbon dioxide, it makes more food and it makes food faster as well. So it takes in more carbon dioxide for photosynthesis to make food. And what is the disadvantage of increasing in size? So the disadvantage is basically the increase in size would result in more water loss through the stomata as water vapor in the process of transpiration. The plant would need to take in more water through the roots, which may not be available. Okay, so when the size of the stomata increases, it actually loses more water vapor. Okay, so in the process of transpiration basically. And thus when it loses water, so it's basically like dehydration, you know. When you lose water, you need to drink water again, right? So when you sweat, you drink water, right? Because you're tired and you have lost water and your body needs water. And this is the same thing for the plants. So the plants need to take in more water through the roots. And sometimes that water will not be available because maybe it didn't rain for very long already, and maybe there's very limited water because there's many plants around the area which are fighting for water. Okay, so there's competition. So this is a disadvantage. Now I hope you understand this question, the answer. Now let's move on to the next question. Okay, so this is the last segment of this video, and I'm going to go through why do the stomata decrease in size during the night time. Okay, so why does the stomata decrease in size during the night time? So at night, the plant is not able to trap sunlight, okay, and would not need to take in carbon dioxide to carry out photosynthesis to make food. Thus, its stomata decreases in size to reduce the rate of water loss as water vapor through the stomata in the process of transpiration. Okay, so this is why it decreases in size. So basically, it doesn't want any disadvantage to happen. So in the daytime, the plant needs more carbon dioxide to photosynthesize, right? But at night, you don't need photosynthesis, right? So that's why it decreases in size, because it doesn't need to take in carbon dioxide, and it doesn't want to reduce, and it wants to reduce the rate of water loss, okay, for in the process of transpiration. That is why it decreases in size during the night time. And I hope you understood this plant cycle, and thank you and goodbye. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.